Okay, Chair, I'll start the recording. Bear with me.
All right, then, no worries.
Right, the recording has started, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee, Wednesday, the 15th of June, 2022. May I remind everybody present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen on screen, or use the raise hand function. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues to the chairman or Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chairman or Democratic Officer know. If they have a webcam, then they should try turning this off, as this will help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so they can at least hear and be heard. Okay. Just bear with me a second. Oh, it's gone off my screen. Mark, have you got the agenda there? It's gone off my screen.
Yeah, of course, Chair.
Sorry, you share it, please.
Yeah, but
I accidentally closed it. It'll take too long to find it again.
bear with me, Chair. I'll have to bring it up. Bear with me. I got a paper copy to hand, so I'll bring up the screen version now. Everyone to see. Bear with me a second. Hopefully everyone can see that. So the first item, Chair, is the appointment of the Vice Chair for the committee.
Okay. I can see Sandra Perks has got a hand up. I was going to ask for nominations, but I think she's beaten me to it. Go ahead, Councillor Perks.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Lovelock Edwards.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second?
That, please.
Okay. And Councillor Hennessy, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I would like to nominate Samantha Campbell, please.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that?
Second.
Okay, so we will take this to a vote. Can we have votes for Councillor Lovelock Edwards, please?
Chair, I don't know if it's easier perhaps to go through the list of members and then they just say whether they want to go for Councillor Campbell or Councillor Lovelock Edwards. I don't know if that would be easier.
Okay.
Okay.
Councillor Aviat, can you cast your vote, please?
Councillor Lovelock Edwards, please.
Okay. Councillor Ball.
Councillor Lovelock Edwards as well.
Councillor Buckley.
I believe Councillor Buckley is sending his apologies, Chair. So he's not on the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Campbell.
I'm going to vote for myself.
Okay. Councillor Carroll.
Councillor Campbell.
Okay, I'm going to abstain. Councillor Hanks.
Councillor Lovelock Edwards, please.
Councillor Hennessy.
Councillor Campbell.
Councillor Lovelock Edwards.
I'll vote for myself, thank you.
Councillor Morgan.
Councillor Campbell.
Councillor Perks.
Councillor Lovelock Edwards.
Okay, Mark, do you have the final figures there?
Bear with me, Chair. Let me just collate those for a second. Right, Chair, let's double check. It's Councillor Lovelock Edwards has the majority with 5 votes to 4, I believe.
Okay. So, Councillor Lovelock Edwards, I congratulate you on becoming the Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Chair. I look forward to working alongside you.
No worries at all. Oh, where is that? Apologies, I'm rushing back from work. I didn't have a chance to get to all the agenda item up before I went on logged on. Okay, so agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. Have we received any? Apart from Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, Councillor Buckley, Chair, and also Mrs. Doyle from the tenant representatives.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have apologies to send in? No. Okay. Minutes of the agenda item 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of April 2022. Is everybody happy with these? Are we happy to accept them?
Yes, yes, Chair.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. So agenda item 4 is the declarations of interest. Do we have any? Okay, so agenda item 5 then is the project. It is the presentation. I can't remember who's taking that.
That's me, Chair.
Okay, if you'd like to go ahead, Miles.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, are you able to share the presentation?
Yeah, bear with me, Miles. I'll bring it up now.
Giving you a busy night this evening.
Okay. Bear with me a second. I'll just bring the slides up now.
Okay.
Hopefully that is sharing
Right.
for everyone now.
I can see that. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so good evening, members. I'm Miles Punter, Director of Environment and Housing, for those of you who don't know me. This evening, I'm going to talk about the Council's business planning process and the role of this committee in that process. Essentially, I'm not going to talk about the intricacies of our services. That'll be something for a future committee. And I know in July, we're looking at the end of year performance across all the headings that this committee is responsible for. So today, it's about our governance arrangements. I'll try and keep it interesting. Some of the terms are a little bit jargonistic, and I'll try and explain them as best I can for those not familiar. So essentially, the council is a business. It's the business that serves our residents, and it is run like a business. So if you can go to slide 2, please, Mark. So every good business has a mission statement. In our case, we term it a vision, and our vision, as you're probably well aware, strong communities with a bright future. To underpin that vision, we have a series of outcomes, and those are the headings you can see there beneath the vision. So essentially, the outcomes, and to look at them like the finishing line. So in terms of performance management, the outcome is where we want to be. So we'll probably never get there because some of these outcomes are pretty challenging. But in terms of where we want to be, those are the headings that we use. So next slide, please, Mark. So as we say, it's about bringing well-being alive. Some of you may be familiar with the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. It's hard to believe that Welsh Government Act came out in 2015 now, so it's quite some time ago. So our visions and outcome are to link and to contribute to the Future Wellbeing and Generations Act. And the 7 wellbeing goals, you'll see in the circle there, a series of goals. These are Welsh Government's goals for Wales. So our governance arrangements are meant to work with those goals and underpin them. So this act, the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, gives us ambition, permission and legal obligation. That's important. So we are legally obliged to follow the details of the Future Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. It's not an option for us. We have to follow this particular act. And it's 7 wellbeing goals, as I've said. The work we do and how members make decisions and scrutinise those decisions is enhanced by the Act by using the 5 ways of working. So on the right-hand column there, you'll see the various terms. Long term. So essentially, when we make decisions, we mustn't just make them for the short term. So we mustn't make decisions for short-term gain. We must always look for the long term and make decisions. And that makes decision making a lot more thorough and thought through. Prevention, some of our decisions are aimed at preventing some other things from happening. So, for example, we would increase people exercising to try and avoid them going into health issues or social care issues in later life. So that's one of the things that we do. Integration, so everything we do must integrate with everything else. So any of our work that we do must link in with the other work that we do. We mustn't do anything in silos. And collaboration is important because most of our work now is done with others. And a brilliant example of that is my colleague is here this evening, Helen Picton, who is head of service for the shared regulatory services. And that is a service that we provide for ourselves, for Bridgend and for Cardiff. And involvement. Involvement, essentially, any decision we take must involve the people that it affects. So in our case, mostly our residents. So we must make sure that everything we do in terms of policy and decisions we make take into account those 5 ways of working. And you may see that the Cabinet report and scrutiny report structure actually features these headings. So when we make a policy decision, we ask ourselves those questions, and we must be able to answer them to show we pay due regard to them. Not only that, if we don't answer them properly or we don't give due regard to them, we could be audited either externally or externally, internally or externally. So it is essentially a lens by which we look at everything we do. So those 5 ways of working are extremely important. Next slide, please, Mark. So I talked before about objectives. The difference between objectives and outcomes. An outcome, as I say, is the finishing line. It's where you want to be. Objectives are essentially measurable, and they are the way by which we get from where we are to the finishing line, to the outcome that I mentioned, the outcomes I mentioned previously. So we have a corporate plan, which is essentially our business planning document, and we have a delivery plan that we produce every year, and the delivery plan measures performance against our corporate planning document. And we also have, I don't want to bore you with all the plans, but we also have individual service plans. So my colleagues here today, Mike Ingramshire from Housing and Helen Picton, as I say, they have individual service plans that they're responsible for that effectively feed into this corporate planning document. So it's all very structured, and there's a thing called the golden thread, if you've heard about that in sort of management terms, that follows from the employee who's, say, for example, picking the bin up to this corporate plan. So everyone knows their role, hopefully, within the organisation, and more importantly, what they're supposed to do within the organisation. So in terms of our 4 wellbeing objectives, they cover the 7 goals that I mentioned previously from Welsh Government. So I'll just take you through them in a little bit more detail. So objective 1, so this is the working with and for our communities. We want you to be involved and to let you know about our work. We want to change how we work to make sure we're prepared for the future. And we want to provide good customer service that meets the different needs of our residents. And we want to get more people speaking Welsh. And we want our staff and members to be able to do their best. So that is essentially what we're looking to achieve in terms of outcome 1. Outcome objective 2, rather, we want to make sure that all children have the opportunity to learn in modern environments. And we want to give people and businesses support, advice and opportunities to help with jobs, money and skills. So another important one. And we want to help people to volunteer. We want to make the Vale a better place to live, work and travel. Objective 3, we want everyone to have a healthy and active lifestyle by encouraging walking and cycling. And we want everyone to enjoy leisure, arts and culture. We want to make sure that everybody gets the care and support they need. We want to keep people safe in their homes and in their community and have access to good quality housing. And last but not least, objective 4, we want to look after and protect our environment for now and the future and work with others to sustain local facilities such as public toilets, parks and play areas. We will reduce waste, lower our carbon emissions and negative impacts on the environment. And we will work to minimise pollution and flooding. So the commitments for the 5 years are all articulated in an annual delivery plan each year, as I've mentioned. And this year's annual delivery plan contains 6 themes. They're shown on the screen, so in the right-hand column. And it shows the emphasis that we give these particular headings. So in terms of our objectives, these themes run through them all. Performance is reported quarterly to each committee. So you will be able to judge us on our performance against a series of headings. They were formerly called performance indicators, but they're not the outcome measures essentially now. So we will bring that to this committee every quarter, and you will challenge us on the things you think need challenging, and hopefully commend us on the things we've achieved. It's been a very challenging couple of years for everybody, but most of our services have continued through the pandemic, and they continued and in most cases performed really well. So you will get an opportunity to see the minutiae, the detail associated with each of our services that essentially report to this committee. And the wellbeing objectives and 6 themes cut across the work of the committee. So there's not one committee with responsibility for any one objective or theme. And collectively, we look to deliver our outcomes for the Vale of Glamorgan by the roles of each of the scrutiny committees. So years ago, we would have defined committees based on set subjects. That's not contemporary at all, and it doesn't. It encourages committees to work in silos. So essentially, we're working now around themes and around outcomes, which we hope would be a better way of working for our residents. So next slide, please, Mark. Okay, to make the connections between services and wellbeing, each committee considers items through the lens of one wellbeing outcome. And the outcome forms a bridge between the collections of services working in different combinations to deliver the corporate plan, commitments and annual delivery plan actions. So in terms of this committee, the headings are underneath the title there. So public housing maintenance, which is Mike Ingram's area, public protection, including all shared regulatory services functions, and that's Helen Picton's area. Community safety, Mike Ingram again. Private sector housing, Marcus Goldsworthy's team. And then there's a role there for our colleagues in social services in terms of Families First and Flying Start. So that you'll get various officers presenting to this committee, and I'll take you through a few of their names shortly. So next slide, please. So these are just myself and other officers. Mike is here today, as is Helen at the bottom of the page there, but there are other officers from the Place Directorate who will also report here, and as I say, from social services who will also report here. There may be other officers we bring along to you, but I wanted to give you the names of those that generally come here to present. More often than not, you'll see Mike Ingram. He has a major role in this committee because a lot of the functions Mike is responsible for. I tend to come along on occasion or when you want me to, but I am the lead director for this particular committee. And the next slide is just the finishing off the list of officers. Okay, on to the penultimate slide now, please, Mark, if you can just go on one. So just a little bit about us supporting your committee. So you will always have a chief officer here from my area, supported by other members of staff. One thing we like to do with committees is get perhaps more junior staff through so you can meet them, making presentations about their work so you can question them. And hopefully it develops them as well as developing you. If questions arise from papers prior to the meeting that are technical, we ask you to ask Democratic Services so that we can prepare. So if you think there's something within the papers because they're produced a week early, we ask you to read the papers if you've got the time, and then formulate your questions based on what you've read. We're not bothered about what you ask us. You're the elected representatives. We won't be offended if you ask difficult questions. In fact, we would welcome that. I'm not just saying that. We've had some excellent debates over the years on this committee and others. We're always respectful of each other. And you might think it's a daft question. No one's ever going to laugh at you if you raise it. And I bet if you're thinking about it, another 5 are wishing they'd ask the same question. So don't ever worry about that. We will support you through those responses. And one of the things we will do if we don't know the answer to your question, we'll always provide you with a written response within a few days of the committee. But if you do see something in the papers that you think, oh, I really want to ask a technical question, we'd ask that you tip off Democratic Services so that we can give you that full response on the night. And for cross-cutting reports, as it says there, like performance, not all the officers attend this meeting. So again, if you see something within the performance report, you think, I want to drill down into something particular, then we will get that officer to attend. So this is your committee. And if you want people to attend on a specific heading, you ask us and we will get those people there. Similarly, if you want me to attend specifically, I don't know, for whatever reason, you just say, tell Democratic and I'll be here. And as I say, we don't know the answers, we'll provide them for you. So that's it really from me, Chair. It wasn't meant to be a warts and all talk about our services we provide, because we could be here for quite some time. But I have brought officers along with me. So Helen is here for issues in terms of shared regulatory services, and Mike for housing and building services. So if members have any questions either around the presentation or around our services in general, we'll be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you very much, Miles. Thank you very much for that. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Perks, you've put your hand up.
Oh, thanks for that, Miles. I just wondered what your budget is and what are the biggest draws on the budget for that directorate. Yeah.
Yeah, they are essentially not for this committee, but I had the committee last night, and the biggest draws is waste management and highway maintenance, because those are our biggest assets, I suppose. We have them under control in terms of the management of them, but those are the ones that, if anything keeps me awake at night, those. And I will hand over to my colleague Mike, because the other thing that keeps me awake at night is issues like homelessness and issues such as the Ukraine conflict and Syrian and Afghan refugees. So if you're happy, Chair, I'll ask Mike to provide his response in terms of the issues for this committee. That whether they keep Mike awake at night, I don't know, but they're certainly wicked complex problems and probably those that you will hear a lot of over the next 12 to 18 months.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Perks, thanks, Miles. I think I don't want to bombard new members with lots of documents. I'm sure you've already been bombarded with documents, but just to for new members, so that you are aware, I'm required to provide a housing business plan annually to Welsh Government, which effectively covers both operational and strategic issues in relation to the business. I think if you haven't seen that document yet, then please let Mark know, and Mark can point you to the relevant link to that document. But that'll effectively give you an understanding of housing as a business. In terms of draw on budget, our major budget issues are, as in terms of council fund, as Miles has just mentioned, homelessness. Currently, members will be aware from your own constituents there is a housing crisis in the Vale of Glamorgan. We don't have enough accommodation, and we have lots of people looking for that accommodation. There isn't a magic wand. We all know that supply is the issue, and that we need more homes for our residents. We're trying our best to enable that to happen. I've been fortunate enough to be, I suppose a generation of, or a couple of generations ahead of housing. I've been the lucky one that's been able to build council housing. And obviously I know the council is extremely proud and ambitious with regard to its aims in terms of building more council housing and enabling more social housing more generally. So one of the factors there is that, we are building as quickly as we can. A major issue for us is lack of land supply. The council doesn't have a lot of unused land that is available to build on. So whilst we have a number of major projects in the pipeline for the housing investment programme, clearly a major issue for us is that land values in the Vale are high. which obviously makes it much more difficult for us to compete in that market. Although we have been extremely successful, and our planning colleagues have been extremely successful in squeezing out of our private developers as much Section 106 affordable housing as they possibly can. And we're one of the most successful local authorities in Wales in terms of generating affordable housing from our private sector developments in the Vale. I suppose the other issue that is a factor and an issue for us at the moment is cost of living, and we are quite quickly looking at the impact of cost of living. Cost of living is much more, as members will be aware, is much more about whether you can afford the heating or fuel or food. It's the other impacts in terms of employment, ability to pay mortgages, ability to pay rent, and I suppose for us as a local authority is having to mitigate and deal with the consequences of what is likely to be something that we're going to be dealing with for a number of years. This isn't going to be something that will be short-lived, and I think that in terms of what keeps me up at night, cost of living is an issue that's keeping me up at night because, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have enough properties. If homelessness increases, which we are seeing, calls on homelessness service, how we respond to that is it's a bit of a jigsaw, as I say. We know we need more accommodation, and we are working as hard as we can in order to generate that. Miles mentioned Ukraine, which is something that I'm concentrating on at the moment and have been for the last 3 months. So apologies for any members who might have had a delayed response, but the Ukraine crisis provides us with a whole host of challenges as a local authority, both in terms of the short-term, medium and the long-term impact. In terms of the short term, we are ramping up our capacity to provide the wraparound levels of support and advice and guidance to both hosts and to families. That has been a challenge, given a lack of information at the outset in terms of how many. That is still an issue. People are arriving in the Vale that we don't know about. That have been issued with visas, and that information hasn't been provided to us. The medium-term impact in terms of a lot of the accommodation that's been made available either hosts or through the super sponsorship scheme, which is the Welsh Government scheme, where they provide welcome centres. Those welcome centres are already at capacity. Welsh Government are urgently looking to expand the number of welcome centres based on what are high numbers of additional visas being issued under the Welsh Government super sponsorship scheme. In terms of the long term and conversations I've had with a couple of members more recently, the long term impact, we are seeing hosting failures for a variety of reasons. In terms of that long term aspect, whilst we would hope that hosts will host for longer than 6 months or potentially longer than a year, our concern is around what happens when those hosting arrangements break down. The council is under a statutory and legal duty to provide services, welfare services, public services to Ukrainians and those with the appropriate visa status. And as we know, the Ukrainian families and individuals that are with us have an approved visa status for 3 years after that visa has been issued. So those are the long-term issues that are keeping me busy at the moment. Longer down the line, asylum dispersal. We've seen what's been in the press over the last 12 months, and I suppose more recently in terms of the Home Office's response to dealing with asylum. I won't comment specifically on that, but the Home Office currently have over 10,000 Afghan families in hotels. There are over 12,000 asylum seekers in temporary accommodation, including hotels. and the Home Office has indicated that that they will be looking now to disperse asylum seekers across the UK. In the past, asylum seekers had been dispersed to 4 regional areas in Wales, which were at Cardiff, Wrexham, Newport and Swansea. They will be now directed across Wales, and I suppose it's the impacts then of that. And I suppose that leads on to another area of our business, which is community safety, and the impacts then in terms of community cohesion issues that could flow from some of those medium and long-term aspects that I've just mentioned. So we're doing a lot of work, continuing to do a lot of work around community cohesion and what the future will hold. So I think I'll probably stop there, Miles. I could go on, but I know it's not good news stuff, although we are providing good services at the moment to mitigate a lot of those effects. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Thank you, Mike. Okay, Councillor Wilson, you are next. Then I'll call on Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. But Councillor Wilson, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sorry, Chair, just to say, so just from procedural view, if Councillor Wilson's happy to hold back, just because obviously he's a cabinet member, it should be the committee members first in terms of questions, if that's okay.
Of course. I don't know where my head is.
No, that's fine.
Don't know where my head is. Apologies. Councillor Lovelock-Edwards, thank you for the reminder, Mark.
That's good to know as well going forward. So thank you, Chair. It's a question to Mike in terms of reading previous minutes, and I was a good girl and I did. The Homelessness Prevention Strategy and Action Plan. As a new member, for point of clarification, is this something that the progress around that action plan is something that you would bring to us as a committee to discuss? Because obviously you've raised a number of pertinent challenges there that are going to, I imagine, require some further consideration in terms of that action plan. Would that be a correct opinion?
Yes, it would be a correct assumption to make. A lot of our strategic plans, our high-level corporate plans, will often go to Cabinet in the first instance, and Cabinet will approve, adopt those documents. They will either come to this Scrutiny Committee first, depending on the nature of the item, or they may be referred from Cabinet. And what this Scrutiny Committee has done in the past is to scrutinise effectively the action plans of strategic documents. So those milestones that Miles was talking about earlier, some of the measurables and some of the mitigating actions, Scrutiny often have that role to actually scrutinise those and make sure that they are on track. And also, if there are issues and concerns, Scrutiny have the ability to refer those matters back through to the Cabinet Executive, through to the Executive, if there are specific issues, which the Scrutiny Committee would do as well.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. Unfortunately, Councillor Wilson, there are 2 more committee members who have put their hands up, so I'll call on Councillor Aviott first and then Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Mike. Concerning the problems that the host families, the Ukrainian refugees, are we giving them as much support as we can? What kind of support are we giving them, and what kind of things can go wrong, please?
In terms of the response and the support, we've entered into a regional partnership with Cardiff Council, partly down to resources, but partly down to expertise. And as I mentioned earlier, Cardiff have taken that lead in our previous resettlement programmes in resettlement. What we've identified, however, has been an issue is that we didn't know the scale of what was coming. And that has caused some delays and issues in relation to home visits and some delays to some DBS checking, just purely down to the capacity of my team to in terms of DBS to process the DBS checks. And of course, there's a delay then in terms of the host providing information, but also the DBS check itself. In terms of Helen's staff have ramped up, if that's the right word. And we are now on top of property inspections, because that's another requirement on us in terms of the support that we provide. In the short term, we've engaged Lamai as a support provider who is providing the initial first stage support and checking. But we know that there will be an ongoing commitment to provide that further wraparound support as the host and the families sort of get to know each other and issues arise and people are looking for employment or welfare benefit advice or whatever it may be. So we do know that we will be looking to employ we've advertised for additional staff. I would say that there aren't lots of support staff, as probably members are aware. There aren't lots of support staff out there at the moment. The pool is not huge, but we are re-advertising. We've advertised once. We're advertising a second time. So the support is ramping up to meet the need. In terms of why are there breakdowns in hosting arrangements, we've had 4 breakdowns in hosting arrangements so far. Expectation, I suppose, expectation of the host and expectation of the Ukrainian family is one of the issues in a couple of the cases. I think we're starting to see. I think I've said this before. You know, I love Christmas. I love my family at Christmas. 2 weeks is enough, though, or a week or 10 days or however long with me. You always want your home back. You. And I think some people haven't thought that process through. I think very laudable in terms of putting themselves forward, but I think there are some individuals who are then having a rethink and issues. In terms of, there have been 1 or 2 concerns that we've had to deal with. Misunderstanding of how welfare benefits work in the UK. And I think that's probably on both sides, and the financial consequences. And this is what I mean in terms of some of the medium-term aspects that we are expecting to see: cost of living, the ability to host a family, and the additional burden potentially perceived within the family in terms of the costs of heating and other ancillary items. But so that I suppose that's sort of where we are at the moment. So yes, there is wraparound support. We're looking to provide further advice and guidance in terms of local circumstances. I've got a meeting tomorrow with Tony Curlis around some of our first stage intervention support, which we're looking to improve. So yeah, I think if in 2 to 3 weeks' time, hopefully we'll have the staff in place and there'll be a lot more positive responses. Clearly there is some frustration from hosts at the moment that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. It's really to follow on from Councillor Aviott's point in relation to the resettlement programme and Ukrainian support for Ukrainian refugees. It's a question really in regard to the authority as a whole. Now, I appreciate we're here to talk about housing, and that's why we're asking you about it. But I've spoken to a couple of individuals, one of whom was an individual putting forward a house, and they have housed a Ukrainian family. The other one was from a community group, and they had a flat that they initially brought forward, actually volunteered to assist with the Afghan refugee program last year. And to the best of my knowledge, from the last time I spoke with the individual, that flat still hasn't been taken up and it's still lying empty. Now, I appreciate there are a number of different reasons as to why that would be. I haven't been asked to take this forward with you, so that's why I'm speaking in general terms rather than actually referring to the specific cases in any more detail than that. But it's just a question really as to if you could outline how the council as a whole operates and the extent to which there is joined up thinking between different departments, because obviously when you're resettling refugees and housing refugees, obviously the housing department is going to be involved, the social services department will be involved, and if there are children involved, as will often be the case, the education department will be involved. And it's not difficult to foresee that if someone's coming forward for housing and there are 2 children, then a school place is going to be required fairly imminently. So the question really, and appreciate education is outside of your remit, what discussions happen between different parts of the council and different officers at the outset to try and make things run as smoothly as possible. I get that it's difficult. I get that when you're doing something like this, it's inevitably not just going to all work like that as much as we would like it, but it is important that we do all we can to make things work as smoothly as possible. And I'd just be grateful if you could outline those procedures in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. You're quite right. It was extremely clunky to start off with because we didn't have any guidance. Information was scant. People were arriving at Cardiff Airport, Cardiff train station and across Wales, and we didn't know they were arriving. So it was very difficult to understand how you would respond to that. Those communication issues have improved somewhat over the last couple of last month or so. So at least we have a fair idea now of sort of what the scale is in terms of the challenge. In terms of you're quite right, this isn't a housing, Ukraine is not a housing response. Housing is one element of that. And I suppose we've taken the lead because a lot of the staff capacity at the early stages has been actually provided by my staff being seconded or moved into additional roles. In terms of governance, I lead an internal group which includes colleagues from social services, health, SRS, and others. We meet weekly. Issues that are raised are coordinated through Tom Dodsworth at the moment, who is our resettlement coordinator. So issues like those we're addressing, and of course there are other partnerships that that are causing some issues as well. So, for example, liaison with health colleagues in terms of the screening that's required for children who are being admitted to schools. We had to wait quite a long time for advice and guidance in relation to schools attendance, admittance with regard to health issues. Those are fairly clear now. So children under the age of 11 can be admitted to primary school without screening and being undertaken initially, but will have to be screened at a later date. Children over the age of 11 still need pre-screening before being admitted to secondary school. That is a health responsibility, and I suppose there is a resourcing issue for health in terms of providing the relevant screening resources that are required and this is an issue across Wales, not just in the Vale, but the ability to, and I know the Chief Medical Officer is working very closely to try and improve that capacity and those resources. So internal working is very close. We're small enough that helps us, you know, because we don't have lots of individuals dealing with this. There's a fairly tight group of individuals who are dealing with these issues at operational and at senior levels. So Helen and I have, you know, discussed issues. You know, one of the issues at the moment is pets, you know, and we know that Wales has taken a different perspective to the rest of the UK in that regard. So we are directed to a certain extent by others, Councillor Carroll. We have to respond to those changes, and we do that as quickly as we possibly can. But I can assure you everyone is working all of the hours that we have at the moment to try and get the response better. It is improving. In terms of the individual and the property that you mentioned, we have been provided with a list from Welsh Government of individuals who had indicated that they were prepared to host but haven't been matched with anyone at the moment. We're currently working our way through that list, looking at those opportunities. If the individual that you're talking about, if you'd like to provide me with that information, that detail, I'll get Tom to actually give them a ring, and because I know Welsh Government at the moment is actually crying out for accommodation to start moving people through the welcome centres. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Cow.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. I will speak to the constituent, and if they consent, I will be in touch.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Do we have any other committee members who would like to speak on this item? I'm taking that as a no. Are committee happy for me to bring in Councillor Wilson now?
Yes,
A lot of
Chair.
people nodding heads. Okay, Councillor Wilson, would you like to come in? Thank you.
Thank you
for
very
your
much.
patience.
That's all right. Fine. It was always fascinating to listen to questions and answers from officers, and very much my role as the cabinet member for neighbourhood and building services mostly is going to be focused on building, but not necessarily entirely, because what we've got to remember, we've got lots of housing estates where issues like recycling will be a big issue, and also even in the private sector housing aspect to this, of houses of multiple occupation as well. And so we do have some major challenges in this area, which I will be responsible for along with the officers. And I'm very fortunate that I've known Miles and Mike as long as I've been on the council. And for people who have been on the council, I know Margaret has been about the same time as me. It's been there 18 years. And I just found out it's our 18th year anniversary. So it's almost like my coming of age party. It is today, effectively, as a councillor, I feel, but I haven't cut the cake yet. But the reality is, I know what good officers we have here, and I want to reassure the Scrutiny Committee members here that you'll be well looked after and well served by them. And I'm also very keen to take responsibility for my area along with the officers, because I think it's important. It's what we want to provide here is a good service to Scrutiny members and other members of the council as well. After all, there's nothing to stop other members of the council participating in meetings as well, and no doubt some will, because obviously there was their interest here. In terms of my background, I'm from a council estate myself. As you can tell, I'm not a South Walian. I still got my London accent there very much, and I'm from central London in Camden town area of London. If you know central London, you've probably been, some of you been to Camden Market. I'm not that far away, although I'm more towards the Euston end of that area. And so I was brought up on a high-rise block, and I do have a passion for council accommodation. I was very, very well keen and a little bit surprised, but delighted actually at the same time. I know that Margaret was also delighted that we won the vote to keep the housing stock way back in, I think Margaret might correct me if I'm wrong in terms of facts, I think probably around about 2010, 2011. And very, very keen. And I think at that time, really, the housing department really put a step forward in trying to really engage with the tenants. And that's been going on ever since, to be honest. And I think that's a real focus. But my primary aim in terms of this committee is in terms of building services. And we've got a great team of people headed by Andrew Churick. I know he's not at the meeting, but he's the operational manager responsible for this area. But we've got a team of around 40 people. We haven't got a huge team of people that looks after the voids, responsive repairs and those sort of areas. And my role, I think, is trying to build in resilience and develop that even further. And I think that is so important going forward. But as you're probably aware, we are lots of pressures. And I think one of the main pressures we have at the moment is the cost of living crisis, which means that people are looking around for other jobs in other areas. And to keep good quality staff is going to be a major challenge. And we not just want to keep them, we want to recruit more of them as well as we build it up. Because I know that one of the challenges on the housing plan going forward is WHQS number 2, which I know that Mike will talk about, probably not today, but later on. And, you know, and obviously we want building service to be very much part of that. We want to keep the money within the council, not necessarily spending it outward. And that's my view and that's my passion. But if anyone wants to ask me any questions, I'm here as well. So thank you very much for my indulgence to speak. I know I've probably spent a bit more than 5 minutes, but thank you very much, Councillor Collins, Chair.
No problem, Mr. Councillor Wilson. Thank you very much. Our committee happy for me to bring Councillor Margaret Wilkinson in now.
Yes, Chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mark, for reminding us how long we've been here. I've always been interested in council housing, on housing as a agenda for everything. If you haven't got a decent home, your life is not worth living. You need a decent home. I fought to save these council houses, and I'm going to get emotional because I had to fight hard, I'll tell you, to keep them, because there was people against us. And we've won, and since then we have worked hard to get these houses up to a standard. And Mike knows how dedicated I am. And I will keep fighting, but I won't say any more, but thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson, I would just like to say thank you for your fight. It was a hard fight and it was well won, and you've done us proud. Councillor Perks, would you like to come in?
Yes, please, Chair. Yeah, I mean, you know, we are lucky in the Vale that we kept it, the council houses, you know, within the actual council itself, because other ones, you know, sort of went to different sort of trusts and things like that. I mean, the hard work that you've all done is fantastic, but what I wanted to just touch on, and you might not have a view on this at the moment, is just the government's announcement that they're thinking of trying to get social landlords to sell their properties, and whether, you know, they've got the ability to sort of do that, or whether it would be different for Wales, because we have our own sort of rules here. And if you could, and you might not have any thoughts about it at the moment, but yeah, off the top of your head, if you like.
Are you on about that, what was in the paper the other day about the right to buy scheme in England being extended to housing associations?
Yes, yes.
To be honest, I don't think that's going to happen over here because we haven't got a right to buy anymore. But Mike is probably the best person to speak to.
Yes. So what was in the press recently was UK English policy, and it was an expansion, wasn't it? It was in relation to registered social landlords, tenants being allowed to purchase their social rented homes. In Wales, as Councillor Collins has mentioned, there is no right to buy in Wales. That was we have our own housing legislation in the devolved government, and the right to buy was removed a few years ago now, 2016, I think it was.
Yeah, 2016, 2017, something like that.
It's hard because COVID, in terms of years looking backwards, COVID has really sort of messed with my remembrance of years gone by. But yeah, so there's no right to buy in Wales. There is no government policy at the moment to revisit right to buy. One of the things, however, I would say from a local authority perspective is we are also mindful that there are people who do aspire to purchase and who would want to purchase. And part of the work that we do through the local housing market assessment is to measure what that demand is for the different tenures within the Vale of Glamorgan. And with our strategic enabling role, which I also have, we look to influence via the local development plan, our own building programme. We look to meet those needs, whilst primarily we are providing social housing on the one hand, and that's what the local housing market assessment is saying is where our priorities should be concentrated. But we're also mindful that there are people who choose to rent, who want to rent, but are finding market rents at the moment outside of their reach. So there's the potential to look at some of our development going forward at less than market rents. We're also looking on some of our larger new build schemes about the potential of providing low cost of ownership options on those sites where they are viable and affordable for us to deliver those sites. So on the one hand, there is no right to buy in Wales, but equally as a local authority, we have to be mindful that there are people within our communities who might wish to want to exercise and to look to purchase property, and we are in terms of gaps looking to fill some of those. We've got some interesting discussions, formative discussions starting now around things like town centre regeneration. Where does housing perhaps sit in that? Now, social housing will have a part, but equally we know that people are working differently now, so a lot more people are working at home or they're working close to home. So there are other areas that we might wish to look at in the future in terms of that shared work and living space. And of course, people may wish to choose to rent, or they may wish to choose to buy in that regard. So I think there's a number of areas, but notwithstanding that, social housing, we've got well over 6,000 people on the council's waiting list at the moment. That's growing daily. Those are people in extreme housing need. We've got nearly 100 people in our bed and breakfasts, which is the post-COVID issue. We're struggling to find move-on accommodation for single people. So, you know, we also mustn't lose sight of that as a strategic priority for this council, to build more homes that people can afford and that people want to live in.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Perks and Mike. If no one else has anything else to say on that item, I suggest we move on to agenda item 6, reports of the Director of Environment and Housing, Shared Regulatory Services Draft Business Plan, I should say. So who is going to be taking that?
That's me, Chair. And good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak with you this evening about the Shared Regulatory Services Business Plan for 2022-23. And I think for members who were with the Scrutiny Committee this time last year, then you will have seen something similar when the previous year's plan was presented. So Mark, I think, is going to share some slides. I thought this time of the evening it's always good to have some pictures and help us to get through things. There is a covering paper, very brief covering report, and it asks for the Scrutiny Committee to consider the content of the draft SRS business plan. Hopefully you've had opportunity to take a look at it. And this is opportunity for pre-decision scrutiny, because it will be taken to the SRS Joint Committee at the end of the month. So we really welcome your thoughts and comments on this. What I've tried to do, obviously you've got the whole plan as part of the papers which have come out to you. What I've tried to do, as I talk you through this evening, is to pull out some perhaps of the more relevant areas of work, achievements, challenges for the future that are particularly relevant and pertinent to the remit of this Scrutiny Committee. But clearly there's an awful lot more in that document. And for members who are interested in finding out more about exactly how the shared service works and exactly what different services we provide within that, then Democratic Services have kindly arranged 2 training sessions for members, and they're coming up shortly. So the first of those is coming Wednesday evening, 22nd of June at 6 p.m. And then the second one, which is called Option 2, is at 10 a.m. On the following Friday, which is the 24th of June. So hopefully, if any members are keen to find out more, you might be able to join one of those sessions and we can go into things in more detail. So if you could change the first slide for me, Mark, please. Okay, so my apologies for those of you who are very well versed in the shared service. I'm just going to take a little while to just outline exactly how we came about and what the service is all about. So from 2013 onwards, there was discussion between the three councils, obviously the Vale of Glamorgan and also Bridgend and Cardiff councils, looking at the resilience of the regulatory services across those three council areas. And this was at a time of the Welsh Government's collaboration agenda. So this is how those initial discussions came about. It was about running services more efficiently, yes, and making some cost savings, yes, but also crucially for building resilience and for allowing areas of specialism, which is what we're able to provide far more than some other local authority regulatory services, possibly, who don't have that larger workforce and ability to specialise. So that was the thinking. We have a single integrated management structure, and governance is through a joint working agreement, which is a very detailed document setting out exactly what the shared service does, and just as importantly, what it doesn't do, and how that is achieved. I mentioned the joint committee, and that is a joint committee comprising two councillors from each of the three local authorities, and that joint committee meets quarterly, and we present papers. A lot of them are statutory documents that have to be prepared and approved. So that goes through the joint committee. And then there isn't a specific scrutiny arrangement, but we engage with scrutiny committees in the three local authorities. So here this evening for the Vale, but equally we will be going to scrutiny at Bridgend and Cardiff at various times throughout the year, so that we can demonstrate that we have that scrutiny of what we're doing and the role of the joint committee. So we go on to the next slide, Mark, please. And again, just very quickly, so you've got this, the way we're structured, we cover environmental health, trading standards and licensing, but the structure of the service isn't those professional silos. We're structured to have a sector of the department which deals with neighbourhood services, and that tends to be anything relating to domestic premises or having an impact on local communities, so things like private sector housing, things like noise, pollution, and also the three licensing services for the three councils sit within that sector. Commercial services, that deals with food inspections and trading standards involvement at a retail level. Health and safety at work, communicable disease and port health. And then enterprise and specialist services is quite a diverse sector containing lots of things. So that's food and trading standards at the non-retail level, so the food manufacturers, that type of premises. Animal health and welfare, air quality, contaminated land and those specialist environmental functions. Our major investigations team, and that's the team that deals with the larger prosecution cases that we take and investigating those very thoroughly. And we also host the Wales Illegal Money Lending Unit, and that sits within that third sector. And then at the heart of the service is it has administration on there, we call it business support, which is the interface between those specialist teams and residents and businesses that we work with. You go on to the next slide, Mark, please. So the business planning process, obviously we have to produce an SRS business plan annually, and it does two things. It delivers the statutory requirements placed upon each council, but it also supports the corporate priorities of each of the 3 councils, and that is done through 5 strategic themes that we have. So hopefully that little graphic there shows how we take the corporate priorities of the 3 councils and then through this sort of golden thread, which we've spoken about earlier, that then is transformed into the strategic themes that SRS has identified, which reflect the corporate priorities, and then that is filtered down into actions and outcomes of the services that we deliver. So we go on to the next one, Mark, please. Thank you. So those 5 strategic themes. The first is improving health and well-being. The second is protecting the environment, supporting the local economy, and safeguarding the vulnerable. And then that central one, maximising use of resources. Obviously, that underpins everything that we do in making the best possible, most efficient and most economical use of resources. And the next one, Mark, please. So to turn those strategic themes into outcomes, you may have had opportunity to look in detail at the business plan, and you'll see that each of those strategic themes is dealt with in its own section, where we show how the theme delivers outputs and actions and outcomes. So I've picked one there, which is the protecting the environment, just to show the thinking there and some of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve and exactly how we will achieve that. And right at the end of the business plan is a bit of a shopping list of the actions that we intend to carry out over the course of the coming year to achieve all of that. The way the business plan is structured, we reflect on what has been achieved over the course of the year, and it's I hope you found it quite user friendly, but the thinking is that telling the story very often and how it affects local businesses, how it affects residents, is far more impactful than just having lots and lots of performance figures. So hopefully you've found the format helpful. If you go on to the next one, Mark, please. So over the course of the business plan, you'll see that we have reflected on 21-22 in delivering those themes, and I've just pulled out a few examples. As you'll see, there are lots and lots and lots of examples in the document itself. So one of the big issues for us again in the last financial year, of course, was responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we did that on a number of levels. So we provided the COVID enforcement and compliance teams, sometimes working with the police, that were making sure that businesses were doing what they needed to do at the various stages of the pandemic, that returning travellers were self-isolating and doing as they were required to do. Also, staff were seconded from their roles, usually environmental health officer roles, into what we call clinical lead roles in supporting the test, trace and protect service, and that was dealing with the escalation of complex cases there. And also, crucially, supporting to a high level those high risk settings such as care homes, which needed additional support, of course, to make sure that they were doing everything possible to minimise or prevent the transmission of the disease. And while all that was going on, over the course of 21-22, we were still trying to maintain the business as usual work as far as possible. So there was the food inspection programme to some extent, but was carried out on a risk-based basis. Housing, pollution and trading standards interventions. Again, there was some limitation on what we were able to deliver because of the huge demands for that second year in the COVID response. And the next one, Mark, please. And then I've pulled out just a few headlines from the document, which I think, as I mentioned earlier, are probably of interest for the remit of the Scrutiny Committee. And some facts and figures here: 94% of the reported scams and doorstep crime incidents were prevented or resolved through intervention. Prosecution of 7 rogue traders and doorstep criminals over the course of the year. We actually had less cases concluding court this year than we would in a normal year, although it probably was about on a par with 2020-21, obviously because of the same reason, the delays, the COVID-related delays in the court process. But looking at just those, the prosecution of just those 7 rogue traders and doorstep criminals, between them, they received a combined total of nearly 10 years in custodial sentences. There was also a 12-month community order imposed and compensation of just over £3,000 awarded to some of those that were affected by their poor trading practices. We had the prosecution of 2 major cases of illegal dog breeding, clearly concerns here for animal welfare, but also those links to organised crime quite often. Huge profits come out of the trade in illegal dog breeding, and you would be amazed at the cost of some of the breeds. It just is absolutely eye-watering when you see what some of those breeds are going for, and concerns about the well-being of some of those breeds, particularly bulldogs with the very sort of squashed faces. So we've had some welfare concerns, as well as the fact that they weren't properly licensed. I know previously for the Scrutiny Committee, colleagues from the Wales Illegal Money Lending Unit have come along to give a presentation. Again, further outreach over the course of the year, and keeping a very close eye on the concern that we've had that throughout the course of the pandemic, and now particularly going into the cost of living crisis, that residents are going to be pushed into the hands of loan sharks just to make ends meet. And we've also been piloting something called the near miss scheme, and that is working with credit unions to underwrite a number of individuals who just missed out on being able to get a loan from the credit union. And that has been really successful, and of course it promotes responsible borrowing and responsible lending. And then the final one on this page is just a snapshot of our work in seizing illegal cigarettes and illegal hand rolling tobacco. And by illegal, I mean it's either counterfeit or non-duty paid. And it's an estimated retail value of getting on for £700,000. So a massive problem. And again, the community issue here is those links with some quite nasty, serious organised crime. And the next one, Mark, please. So looking ahead, just pulled out some of the challenges for the shared service from the business plan. We need to be able to respond to the emergence of any coronavirus variants of concern as we go into the autumn and winter. So that absolutely has to be in the backs of our minds, that we may need to ramp up the COVID response if things change for the worst as we go into the winter. At the same time, we need to recover that lost ground I mentioned in our business as usual interventions. For example, the food programme, and we've been working to a Food Standards Agency recovery plan for the food programme, and that's a pathway, a transition, if you like, to get local authorities from the dark days of the COVID response back onto exactly where we should be on that food inspection programme, and we're delivering where we should be on that Food Standards Agency recovery plan. Another huge challenge for us is addressing current difficulties in recruitment and retention in certain roles, and what we need to do in the coming year is to develop a workforce strategy, embracing new ideas. We need to be innovative, including supporting regulatory apprenticeships. And this is something which Welsh Government have just given the green light for. So we're really hopeful that we will have a pathway for young people to come into a career in environmental health, in trading standards, because for young people quite often they're not obvious career choices, and hopefully by being able to publicise this through a regulatory apprenticeship, it will open up opportunities for young people. I think we're nearly there now, Mark. A couple more slides if we could change again. So the emerging issues that we have to be mindful of, and these are woven through the business plan. Absolutely no surprise when I put top of the list the cost of living crisis and its effects in the marketplace. Absolutely natural that at this time of rising fuel costs, rising energy costs, all the pressures on families, that residents are going to want to look for that best deal they possibly can. The danger in that, of course, as we know, is that the rogues and the doorstep criminals will capitalise on that, and they will continue to rip people off. And now it is probably the worst time ever that could happen, because budgets are so stretched. Climate change and minimum energy efficiency standards in the private rented sector. This is an area that we're keen to really get into this coming year. And the huge benefit of that is not only delivering on the climate change agenda, but also if we are able to drive up energy efficiency in the private rented sector by working with landlords and letting agents, then we will be able to minimise as far as possible the cost of heating those homes. New legislation inevitably will be coming down the line. So we've got the Renting Homes Wales Act, which will now come in December. And we're waiting to find out exactly when we'll go live with the Public Health Wales Act provisions relating to special procedures and smoke-free requirements. Special procedures, you may already know, is those procedures such as tattooing, acupuncture, and piercing. So we're waiting for those provisions, which should have come out just before COVID hit and have been delayed, waiting for those to come out, which will really tighten up controls in that sector. And then there are the supply chain difficulties. Many causes of that. Probably no need to go through those. But again, with those supply chain difficulties, we have to be mindful of the need in terms of foodstuffs. If particular ingredients are not available, then all that packaging has to be replaced, the labelling has to be amended. And if someone has an allergy, then clearly that could be a major difficulty. And so there's a real need to make sure that that allergy awareness labelling is properly covered off. And again, rogues will exploit the situation. So we fully expect to see an increase in substitution with perhaps cheaper products, and counterfeiting is likely to follow as well. And the next one, Mark, nearly there now. So some pictures just to leave you with, really. Just again to emphasise the breadth of the services that Shared Regulatory Services provides. All the work that we do across the three councils in relation to air quality, and where necessary, delivering air quality action plans to improve air quality. The Vale at the moment, we've got absolutely no concerns with air quality. Everything is as it should be. The picture then, working clockwise at the top, is in relation to those special procedures that I was talking about. Cost of living is the next one. And then the one which is the bottle of oil, then that's supposed to be sunflower oil. And that's just a really good example of the impact of the war in Ukraine and the fact that nearly all the world's sunflower oil comes from Ukraine, and the impact that is having on the food industry and food labels at the moment. Moving down to the bottom photo, again, we can probably take that on a number of levels: cost of living, but also safeguarding work that we do to ensure that older, perhaps more vulnerable residents are protected. And we do things like installing call blockers to make sure that nuisance calls are no longer an issue for people who have been repeatedly targeted by them. And then our friend, the coronavirus, is that last picture. And the message there for me is that with everything else going on, we still need to balance that possibility that we will need to second staff back to delivering some sort of COVID response if we get a variant or variants of concern in the colder weather. And then very last slide, Mark. So next steps, the business plan will be presented to the Joint Committee on the 28th of June. Consultation with partner agencies is still ongoing, so there may be some degree of change to the final version of the plan. But your thoughts this evening are welcomed on that plan, and any ideas for improvement. Obviously, happy to take any questions that you may have. If you would prefer to email me with comments, then they would be gratefully received too. So whatever would suit you best. And that's me done, Chair.
Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you. That was very, very informative. Does anybody have any questions? So I saw a hand go up and then it went down, so I'm not sure who that was.
I believe it's Councillor Hanks, Chair.
Oh, yes, the hand's gone back up. Councillor Hanks, if you would like to come in.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Helen. I thought it was an excellent and well documented business plan, and I also thought it was very user friendly as well. So thank you for that. I was just going to ask you about recruitment and retention. You mentioned that the Welsh Government are offering apprenticeships. Has that started, and if not, when will it? And about how many do you hoping to offer per year, please? Thank you.
So the apprenticeship, regulatory apprenticeship, this is a very, very recent development. Welsh Government have just pressed the go button. So that means that Qualifications Wales has to be involved. They will help to produce the qualification that will form the backbone of that regulatory apprenticeship. Training providers have to be brought in. A steering group has to decide the content of that qualification. Then it's got to go for public consultation for 4 weeks, I believe. Then it comes back for ministerial sign-off. So we are a way off still, unfortunately, but we've made huge strides to get to this point, because I've been on a bit of a mission to secure a regulatory apprenticeship for Wales for the last 3 years. Obviously, pandemic in the middle of it didn't help, but we're now, I'm really encouraged with the progress. So as to an exact timeline when we as Vale of Glamorgan Council will be able to take on apprenticeships under that regulatory apprenticeship scheme, I honestly don't know, but I will keep pushing so that happens just as quickly as possible. And we will need to look at the figures to see exactly how many we will be able to take on, because we will need to sustain them for a number of years. So there's some financial planning to do, but I'm really, really keen that we capitalise on this, because as I mentioned, it's now a way of making careers in local government, in regulatory services, much more visible to young people, which is absolutely what we want to do. Unfortunately, we're an ageing population, or an ageing workforce, and it's really important that we get some young people in. So looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo Councillor Hank's comments with regards to the presentation and the plan. I just have a couple of questions, and the first one is staying with recruitment and retention. And you say in the report that the causes are multifaceted, and you highlight obviously the ageing workforce, and you've explained about the apprenticeships. But just it's silent on the role of trade unions, and I don't know if that was a pertinent thing or if that's something that where trade unions would be able to play a suitable role in terms of certainly retention and how you overcome those barriers. The second question was around taxis. I understand that from your report that you did some training was undertaken, and it seems it was sort of well received around the child sexual exploitation training and awareness. And I was wondering if there was capacity, if it hasn't already been done, around disability awareness for the same sector. And then thirdly, it was around the empty homes. There was no data for the Vale, unless I've missed it, and I just wanted some clarification on Cardiff and Bridgend were given specific information on that, but not for the Vale. And I know that there's been a body of work done around that, as discussed earlier. So if you could just clarify for that for me, that would be really useful. Thank you, Helen.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. If I do those in the order that you presented them, if I can remember, I've jotted down. So the first one was looking at that recruitment and retention issue, and my plan is that we consult with staff, and I think you make a really good point about including the trade unions in that, and nothing off the table. We need to think long and hard about what it is that it may be barriers to recruitment. It is a tiny population of qualified staff out there. I think that's at the heart of it. But if there are other issues and ways that we can make sure that we're retaining staff, then obviously we need to identify what those are, and that will be part of this piece of work, a work stream to bottom some of those issues out. So that would be something we deliver this year. On the point about taxis and the awareness raising that SRS has done, again, disability awareness, this is something that is raised through the whole process of getting the drivers on board and the refresher information. But we continue to get complaints about provision of taxis in certain circumstances. So yes, absolutely, that's something that we can make sure that we continue to raise the profile on. And we've recently done some mystery shopper checks, and actually the results of those mystery shopper checks in terms of disability and the ability of taxi drivers to deal with the situation appropriately was actually very, very encouraging. And then the last point on empty homes, there is a simple answer for the fact that it probably did look a little bit odd reflecting on it in the SRS business plan that we're talking about Cardiff and we're talking about Bridgend. It's because SRS doesn't have responsibility in the Vale for empty homes, so that would sit elsewhere.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Any other committee members wish to speak? I'm assuming that's a no. Are committee happy for me to bring in Councillor Ruba Civignano? I'm sorry, Civignanum. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, if you'd like to come in then, please.
That was very well pronounced, Councillor Collins. Well, thank you for your indulgence. All I want to say is that whilst I've been in this role for a week and a half, I have to say I'm really impressed with the work that Helen and her team are doing. The shared regulatory services, I think, is a really good news story for the Vale, because it demonstrates how we can work in partnership with 2 other local authorities and really share our expertise, take the lead in some areas, and really serve our community. And actually picking up on Belle's last comments around the taxi drivers, I think I'm hoping that we are looking at these things through a equality lens. I apologise. In terms of ensuring that that we are reaching all our all our communities, but also serving them in the best possible way. So I just really wanted to congratulate Helen and her team, and really reiterate to the committee that this really is a good news story. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Okay, if there is nobody else who'd like to speak on this, then can I ask if we're happy to move and note the report? Okay, thank you. So thank you very much for your time, Helen. You don't have to stick around if you don't want to, but you are more than welcome to. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Go on to agenda item 7, report to the Chief Executive, 4th quarter scrutiny recommendation tracking 2021-22 and proposed annual forward work programme schedule 2022 to 23. Is that you, Mark?
Yeah, that would be me, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee. This, for our newer members, is a report that is regularly provided to the committee. We provide it on a quarterly basis, and essentially it's to report progress on the previous scrutiny recommendations made at the committee, and in this case to confirm the committee's proposed annual forward work programme for 22-23. The report advises members of progress in relation to the Scrutiny Committee's historical recommendations and the proposed annual forward work programme schedule, as I've already outlined, for 22-23. We have a number of appendices. Just to summarise, appendices A through to D are the previous recommendation tracking for the periods for March 2022, October to December 21, April to June 21, and we also have a 2019-20 uncompleted recommendation tracking. We also have Appendix E, which is the Cabinet Annual Forward Work Programme for 22-23, and this is just to give members reference to one of the key feeders for the committee's work, which is, of course, Cabinet reports, which will come through to committee via referral. And this will come to, some will be specifically for Homes and Safe because of the nature of their remit, and some will be more general. For example, some of the financial reports, which will go to all scrutiny committees for their consideration and consultation. Just to make members aware, we have a few recommendations. The first one is that the status of the actions listed in Appendix A through to D to the report be agreed. That Cabinet Annual Forward Work Programme for 22-23 attached to Appendix E in the context of Home and Safe Communities Annual Forward Work Programme be noted. And also finally, we have our own Annual Forward Work Programme, which we ask committee to approve in order for it to be uploaded to Council's website. I'll just go through some of these very briefly. Just in order, just to give members more detail, because I do appreciate it's going to be a new item for many members, and there's a lot to take in this report. Just to go through some of the appendices around recommendation tracking. We do have some ongoing on here, just to make members aware, and I'll draw members' attention to Appendix C, which is April to June 2021. This is in relation to a recommendation we had in April of last year, and this was an update on the dark service. Now, this is a report that committee will be getting as well in future, and is around the domestic abuse assessment and referral coordinator and the work done by the council in relation to that. Now, the outstanding recommendation here is the dark service have greater engagement with support groups concerning domestic abuse, which was raised by members at the time. Just to say that this is ongoing, so it's not that it's been left behind. It is an ongoing and evolving item, and it just that we've had a recent impact, a recent update on that. Just to say that due to the impact of COVID-19, this work was delayed due to the overriding priority of keeping victims safe and difficulties in meeting with victims due to obviously ongoing issues around coronavirus and infection. Officers have met with the Chief Executive of Athol Fro, which is the domestic abuse provider of services in the Vale, to discuss this priority, and has been agreed that scoping work will take place in the autumn of 2022. So obviously committee will be kept updated via this quarterly report, and also further reports that will come to committee around the work that DARC does. I'll refer members to Appendix D as well, which is another ongoing item for the committee. This is an item originally brought forward to committee in 2019, but various iterations of this have come through to committee since, and this is around the report identifying an appropriate housing solution for traveller community. Just to say, this has gone through to committee previously and on to cabinet. Just to say that there has been further work around a new gypsy and traveller assessment for the Welsh Government. And I think if I can just double check, Mike, if you're still on the call, I think there has been some progress that has gone to Welsh Government, or draft has gone to Welsh Government, is that right?
Yes, Mark. Local authorities are required to provide an assessment of gypsy and traveller needs in its area every 5 years. The last report is the 2016 report. Due to COVID, there was a delay, and authorities were allowed to delay their report, but was required to be provided to Welsh Government by the 31st of March this year. A draft report has been presented. The Housing Department commissioned Opinion Research Services, who specialise in this area, to undertake the survey. A draft survey report is being shared with Welsh Government, although they are aware that it's still in its draft format. That draft report is currently going through officer consideration in terms of the outcomes and the outputs from that report. And in terms of previous experience, that report will ordinarily come to Scrutiny Committee for consideration prior then to onward referral and adoption by the Council. In terms of its relevance, it's got huge strategic relevance in terms of its outcomes and its output, because, as members will be aware, the Council is going through its LDP review, and the LDP relies on that document in order to identify the development need or the delivery of the unmet need that's identified in that report. As Mark has mentioned, the previous Cabinet and Scrutiny Committees have considered this matter on a number of occasions. Officers continue to seek alternative sites, which will obviously now be informed through the review of the LDP, and also the needs of the unmet needs that have been identified under the 2022 report. And as I say, we'll come back to Scrutiny Committee in due course once the draft report has been approved.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. Just to move members on then, is the final appendix, which is the Appendix F, gives the draft forward work programme for the committee for this municipal year. just to make members aware, it is a bit of a moving feast. So from quarter to quarter, there will be changes. Some items may slip or get swapped around to different dates, but there is a relevant table, relevant column on there where we will make members and the public aware if things have slipped or if there have been changes and move arounds. So obviously there will also be potentially new reports that will be added that committee may want to have, and presentations as well. So they will be included, and we'll obviously make a note on that as well as we move on ahead. Just to make committee aware, there are one or two typos on here. There's one regarding presentation of digital inclusion. Now it has got July, which is correct, but it's in the June section, so that will be amended and moved prior to uploading. Also got closure of accounts 2020-21, that should be 2021-22. So again, they will be amended should committee approve, and uploading of this, we will get those amended before they go up. Like I say, it's a moving feast. We do have some regular statutory reports, but there will be other reports that will potentially come on to this in due course, and they will be put on there and provided to committee when we have future quarterly reports on this. I think that's really everything, just to summarise, Chair. So I'll obviously hand back to you, and if members do have any questions or comments, I'll attempt to answer or obviously refer back if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, we have no questions for you today, Mark. So I'm just going to ask if committee are happy to accept the recommendation number 1, that the status of the actions listed in Appendix A to D of the report be agreed.
Yes,
okay.
Chair.
I can see a lot of thumbs up and nodding of heads. Okay. Are we happy to accept recommendation number 2, that the Cabinet's annual forward work programme for 2022-23 attached to Appendix E in the context of the Homes and Safe Community Scrutiny Committee annual forward work programme 22-23 content be noted?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. And are we happy to accept the 3rd recommendation, that the committee's proposed annual forward work programme schedule for 2022-23 attached to Appendix F be approved and uploaded to the Council's website?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Great.
So,
just to say, Chair, those typos and amendments I've made already highlighted. They will be done prior to uploading, so we'll incorporate that in the recommendation as well. Thank you.
Of course. Okay, so that's agenda item 7. Agenda item 8 is any items that I have which are urgent under part 1. I don't really have anything urgent under part 1, but there is something that members may be interested in. A little while ago, any returning members will remember that we had people come in and talk about the one-stop shop, and that there was going to be a formal launch at some point. We've now been advised that that formal launch will be happening on the 22nd of July. All right. And it'll be from 11 till 2. So I just thought I'd let members know, and that they can then let us know if they're interested in going, kind of get a level, an idea of numbers. And I will let Mike come in on that as well.
Yeah, it's really important because the sort of public setting there is relatively small. There's still a requirement, even though COVID is sort of behind us to a certain extent. Pobble do have some stipulations with regard to occupancy numbers. So getting back to us and letting us know one way or the other is important. Equally, I've also spoken to Pobble, and if members are not available on the particular date, we can by arrangement arrange for members to pop up and have a look at any other time. There was a soft launch of the one-stop shop a little while back, and obviously then COVID became an issue, but it's really welcome to see that it's now open, it's operating as envisaged, and I think you'll be really pleased with the efforts there in terms of the housing related support services that Pobble will provide. So please come along. If you've got a spare 10 minutes, half an hour, please pop along and see us.
Okay, thank you, Mike. That was all the items on part 1. The next agenda item is any items I've decided are urgent under part 2. I have nothing under part 2. So all I have to say now is to say thank you very, very much for your time tonight. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Only a very quick one, Chair. Just to say to members, I will be forwarding you just some information around the call-in and request for consideration processes. I know members are probably, those that have been on council previously are aware of it, and some of the new members will have been aware of it via the induction process, but I'm just going to send some more details because we've been asked at the scrutiny committees just to remind members about that process and that engagement. So I will forward an email to you shortly just on the details where that is in the constitution, etc. And if you do have any questions, please either come back to myself or another colleague in the Democratic Services. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. All right then, so all I can say, thank you very much for coming, and just want to remind you now that the next meeting is on the 6th of July. Enjoy the rest of your evening, guys.
Thank you,
Mark?
Chair.
No problem.
Good evening, everyone.